Thank you for being a loving God. In your name I pray. Amen. You can have a seat. Last week, Kirk is the lead pastor here, and he talked a bit about his father and the things that his father taught him. My father was a pastor. He worked at a church it was a small church in Ontario, a place called Georgetown. Toronto has kind of gone and eaten up that town now, but when I lived there, it was its own separate town. And he was at a church called Georgetown Alliance Church. Now, that church has recently gone through a name change. That church's name, and I'm not kidding, is Living Hope Alliance Church, Georgetown, Ontario. Now, some of you know my father, most of you don't. I share the same name as him. He is Peter Elf. And I started at this Living Hope Alliance Church, just for the sake of keeping things clear. We'll call this one the real one, and we'll call that one the wrong one. So I started at the real Living Hope Alliance Church the exact same day that the wrong Living Hope Alliance Church changed their name. On Facebook, that looks like Peter Elf has begun pastoring again at Living Hope Alliance Church. We had some fantastically confused people congratulating us, thinking I was my father, wondering how, then there were other people wondering how Mandy and I got to Ontario. We hadn't said anything about that, so, how did they not know about this? And it took me quite a while to piece together that this church had changed. Like, what's the chance of that? It was very strange. But anyway, Georgetown Alliance Church is the church that I really grew up in. Sometimes when people say that, they mean that that's where they attended on Sunday. That is not what I mean. I mean, when I was a kid, that was my playground. We met it was a rented hall. There was a gymnasium in there. And we would set up chairs every week for church, and then at the end of church, he'd tear it all down. And I remember waiting for my father to finish whatever he was doing, and I would play in that sanctuary. I'd run up and down the aisles. I remember where I would walk with wooden chairs, and I would try to walk from one side of the sanctuary all the way to the other without my feet ever touching the ground, just always stepping on these chairs. And then you get to an aisle, and it wasn't quite this large. You have to jump over top. And it was my playground. My father preached at a table, like a cafeteria table, just a long wooden table. There's a little thing on it that he would put his Bible on. And I would bring a chair up behind it, and I would stand on that chair so that I was sort of the same height as him, and I would pretend that I was a preacher. Deep down inside of me, God planted a seed that turned into my mission. From the time I was about 4 years old, I knew God wanted me to be a pastor. I knew it. And my parents would always get me, try to keep my ideas broad. What do you want to be when you grow up? Tell us anything. Anything you do, we'll be happy with that. But I wanted to be a pastor, and I couldn't have articulated it. But I wanted to be a pastor because God wanted me to be a pastor. God planted that inside of me. So the question is, how does one become a pastor? In the Christian Missionary Alliance, which is the denomination that this church is part of, and so is the wrong Living Hope, the path is clear. Here's how you do it. The very first thing you do, if you'd like to be a pastor, the very first thing you do is you get involved in the church that you are at, like right now. Yesterday, you get involved. All of the reasons why you're not involved, lay those down. God has called you to this. Get involved. Anywhere that help is needed, you get involved. Then, once that is complete, then you graduate high school. Once that's done, you go to Bible school. Bible school is set up very similar to most other sorts of universities, where you go and you take classes, you write papers, you write exams. At the end of that, you graduate and you get licensed. Once you're licensed, that means that you're able to do things like when someone gets married, you sign your name down and there's a number that's associated with that, and that makes them legally married. And you get hired at a church and people call you pastor. At which point you get into an ordination process. And that ordination process, at the end of that, is where you have the title reverend. That's how you do it. That's how most people do it. That's the path. For me, my path was a little bit different. And I'm going to tell you a bit about that today as we go through our series of Life on Mission. There's one key thing that's going to come up through this whole sermon, and it is this. My mission is twofold. The first is, and this is in order of importance, the first is that I will be a good father and husband. This is my primary mission. My secondary mission is that I will serve as pastor in the bride of Christ, and I will do so to the best of my ability. It's my mission. This is my life on mission. Last week, Kirk was talking about the book of Nehemiah. He was talking about the character of Nehemiah. And if you remember who Nehemiah is, I'll give you a quick recap of the sermon last week. Nehemiah is a person who has looked at Jerusalem, which is where his ancestors are from. And the walls of Jerusalem have been torn down in a war. They've been torn down for more than 100 years. So Nehemiah was not from Jerusalem. Just his ancestors were. Nehemiah lives elsewhere, and he gets special permission to go rebuild these walls. Now, he gets permission, but there's a caveat on this. He must return. He's not going to Jerusalem to live there. That's not going to happen. He's going to accomplish a particular mission, at which point he's going to turn around and come home, and that can never change. And so he gets permission, he goes over and he organizes people, and they begin to build these walls. This is a massive project. This is a city that is in confusion, is in disarray, and he has to organize people, and he has to organize the actual physical stuff that it will take to build this, and he has to get this going. And so he starts building these walls. Last week, Kirk told us a bit about how that looked and the different parts of the walls and the different people that were involved, but you need to understand there were many, many people involved in the building of these walls. We're going to pick up this story in Nehemiah 4. This is found on page 373 in your brown Bibles. I invite you to turn there to look at this. I'm going to work starting in chapter 4, and I'm going to dip in and out of this scripture. I'll bring your attention to certain verses, but I'm going to give you the narrative of what's going on. So Nehemiah is building. And as this is going up, there are people who are in other kingdoms around him who are getting upset. Now, why would they be upset? Well, the walls of Jerusalem, when they are standing, that means Jerusalem is protected. The product of Jerusalem is protected. The people, the crops, the animals, the money, anything that happens there is a protection. But when those walls are down, invading forces can come, step over where the wall used to be, walk in and take what they want. They have done this for so long that they actually look at Jerusalem and its product as if it is part of their income. They own it. The invading forces just come and take it, and there is nothing that Jerusalem can do to stop it. It's a tremendously discouraging place to be. Have you ever had someone take from you? It's incredibly discouraging. So I'm going to pick this up. Chapter 4, verse 1. Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. This is Nehemiah who's writing this. He flew into a rage and mocked the Jews. So Sanballat is a person who is in authority elsewhere. As we'll find out in this chapter, he is in front of very important people. So he himself is a very important person. And suddenly this guy named Nehemiah shows up, and it looks like he's taking from Sanballat. It looks like he's taking what is rightfully Sanballat's. And Sanballat is understandably upset. And so Sanballat starts to create methods of discouraging the people who are building the walls, methods of discouraging the leadership, which would be Nehemiah. He begins to try to knock down some of the gusto that these people are building with. And if you've ever been in a project where you're watching something happen and it's going well and it's growing and it's getting better, you can see that the result of your labor, things are going well. That's where the people of Jerusalem are. And Sanballat wants to stop that. So he starts to do something. He and some of his friends, they start to do something. They start to send discouraging messages, real discouraging, saying things like, how can he build this wall when it's been torn down? In fact, it's been lit on fire, and that act of burning this, it means that the stuff that they use to build it, it's like taking a piece of wood and burning it till it's ash. You can't make a wall out of ash. You can make it out of wood, but it's not wood anymore, it's ash. So how can they even think that they're going to do this? And so as he says this, he's doing this to discourage the people who are building it. Nehemiah hears this. Now, Nehemiah is on mission. His mission is to build the wall. So as this discouragement comes, he's been listening to God, which, by the way, listen to God. That's the first point in your bulletin. I invite you to fill that out. As he's been listening to God, now there is something that stands in the way of his forward momentum. So how is he going to deal with that? In my life, my mission was to love my family and to be a pastor. The method to do it was clear. When I was in about grade 4, my teachers and my parents began to notice something. They began to notice that there are certain areas that I was falling behind in my academic world. There were things that other kids were doing and other subjects that they were picking up very quickly, and I was struggling. And it wasn't because I wasn't attending the class. It wasn't because I wasn't trying. It just wasn't working. And so under the guidance of the school, my parents decided that they needed to send me in for some testing. And that is the first time in my life I had ever heard the term learning disability. Now, learning disabilities tend to come in threes. Not always, but they tend to. And in my case, they do. And I've got 3 different learning disabilities. And I'm going to try to describe them for you. They've got very long words that are written in some other language. I don't know what they're called, but I'll tell you what the effect of them is. The first is I have a memory issue. This is really a problem. I don't remember much of anything. I have to write it down. I'm amazed at the people who just remember everything. Kirk and I grin at each other because Kirk doesn't forget a thing. And it's like he's you remember film with the negative, he's the positive, and I just don't remember. I have to write everything down. Well, not remembering things is really an issue when it's time to write an exam. Now here's the second thing I've got. I have got this issue where I have a type of dyslexia. And that means that when I go to read, the words on a screen or the words on a book, they just swim. And so the word isn't connected, or the letter isn't connected to a word. And even if it was connected to the word, it's just, I can't read it. And as my stress goes up, my reading ability drops way, way off. So I can't read. And if I could read, I couldn't remember what it said. Here's the third part. I have what is called ADD. Now, when you say you have ADD, people have peculiar responses to that. I've been told that ADD is actually nothing. It's just because I'm not focusing and I'm not trying. That is not accurate. People say all kinds of stuff. But let me put you in a position. Let's say you're in a class. And that class, you need to read a book, and at the end, or several books, and at the end of those books, you need to write a paper. And then at the end of that paper, you're going to write an exam. This is the structure that schools have. I can't read. Even if I could read, I couldn't remember. It's not that I can't read. I struggle to read. But even if I could do that easily, I can't remember what the sentence was I just read. And seeing as I can't remember it anyway, I'm thinking about something completely different. This makes me dynamite at parties, but I'm no good at an exam. The calling on my life, my mission, the mission given to me by God from the time I was 4 years old, is is to love my family, to be a pastor. What a tremendously discouraging path I was on. And it just came from everywhere. And people saying, why don't you just do something that you don't have to go to school for? Which, okay, what's the list of that? Why don't you just do something different? And I was standing there, and I'm so grateful for who my parents are and their relentless support, never wavering. Not everybody has that, but I did. And it was my mission. Nehemiah's mission is to build this wall. And he is having discouragement come from very convincing people. And so he prays. And this prayer, this is an amazing prayer. If you ever wondered, can you pray what you really want, or do you have to sort of sanctify your prayer before you pray it? Just listen to this prayer, and then you tell me your own conclusions. Then I prayed, hear us, O God, for we are being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads. May they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Do not ignore their guilt. Do not blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders. This is an emotional prayer. Like this is next level upsetness. He's praying, God, make these guys prisoners somewhere else. Get them out of here. Don't forget what they've done. Don't forget how they've trying to pull us off mission. The mission to build this wall, to turn Jerusalem back into a place that's got an organizational structure in it that makes it so that people are safe. Keep the bad guys out, keep the good guys in. Keep out what isn't supposed to be here and keep in what is supposed to be here. That is the mission, God. And there are people in Nehemiah's way. Tremendously discouraging. Then the wall is halfway completed. At halfway completed, you're halfway there. Everything's downhill from here, like in a good way. Everything is, you're coasting a little easier now. So great, we're ready to go, right? People are encouraged. People are excited. This is going really well. Sanballat gets involved again. He's watching this, and he realizes that the discouragement that he is lobbing out there has not worked. And it hasn't worked because Nehemiah has listened to God. And the second point, he has let God deal with the discouragement, deal with what's going on. The things that Nehemiah can't stop from happening, he just hasn't worried about that. Or rather, he has worried about it, but he's brought that to God in prayer. He hasn't modified the plan. He hasn't taken his eyes off the goal of building this wall. He's let God deal with it. And so the people are excited. So Sanballat ups the intensity in a big way. He realizes that there's an organization that's happening, and this is a very threatening thing. So he gets his guys together and he says, what we're going to do is we are going to go into where Jerusalem is. We can still do that. We're going to go into there and we are going to create mass confusion. We're going to create confusion in every way that we can so that the people will take their eyes off the goal, will start fights. Doesn't matter what the fight is about. So long as there's a fight, they're not focused on building the wall. So we're going to do this. This is going to be the ticket. Nehemiah hears about this. So on this end, he's got Sanballat. And Sanballat is offering discouragement, and he's coming. Now, suddenly, on this side, the workers begin to complain. The people who are supposed to be on mission are now complaining, and they're saying, the workers are getting tired, and there's so much rubble to be moved. We'll never be able to build the walls by ourselves. Have you ever been there? Have you ever looked at the task in front of you and said, this is a huge task. It is far bigger than I am capable of doing. What happens when the task is the mission that God has given you? And so Nehemiah has got a fight coming from this way. He's got discouragement and fights coming from this way, and he himself is still there with a shovel, digging holes, putting up posts, building bricks. It's a massive task. And Nehemiah does something here. This is so important that I want you to write this down at the bottom of the page. I want you to tear it out and stuff it in your pocket. And I want you to go back and I want you to reread this verse again and again this week. In fact, don't ever take it out of your pockets. This is so good. Listen to this. So this is in verse 14, about halfway down the page. As I looked over the situation, I called together the nobles and the rest of the people. That just means everybody. Called them all together. And I said, don't be afraid of the enemy. Don't be afraid of the person who is stopping the forward progress. Don't be afraid of the person who has an army. Don't be afraid of the person who you should be afraid of. Don't be afraid of that person. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious. Where's your focus? All of the fighting that's going on, where is your focus? Is your focus on God, or is your focus somewhere which is off the mission? And then he says this, if you ever want to rile people up, here's how you do it. And fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Oof. Like, it was one thing when you were discouraging me, but now you're telling me that what I do matters for other people? Maybe even for my own family, that they are watching me. Maybe what I am doing they will draw from. Do this for your family. Do this for your everything. Do this for everyone you care about. Suddenly, it's not people standing there going, the work is so much, I just can't do it. They're saying, bring me the shovel. But Sanballat is still coming. So Nehemiah goes on to say, he got the workers to hold a shovel in one hand and a sword in the other. Their workload has just increased exponentially, but they are eye on the ball. They're eye on mission. Keep fighting. Keep your eye on mission. Let God deal with that which is not your mission. The things that get in the way of your mission, let God deal with that. You keep your eye on the mission. When our enemies heard that their plans, when the enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, they returned to our work on the wall. But from then on, only half my men worked while the other half stood guard. The plan is the plan, but there is a discouragement that comes, so the method of the plan has to change. This is my story. My plan was to become a pastor. You're going to go to school, you're going to get licensed, you're going to be pastor. But the method had to change. The details had to change. I had to modify that plan. To all of the discouragement that came, I had to continually modify it. But I could never take my eye off the goal because that was God's mission. And he called me to it. He said, love your family and serve in a church. It was my mission. The next part of this story is, there's something there, I wish I could take you through it. You want to come next week. Kirk is working on Nehemiah 5. There's a load of stuff in there we need to hear. There's some stuff in there that will guide us. I'm going to jump over top of that, and I'm going to go back to Nehemiah 6. But come next week. So in Nehemiah 6, Sanballat and these other guys they find out that the walls have now been built to completion. Now what's left is to hang the doors. Now these doors are huge. These doors are there to keep people out. So these are hefty doors. They've got to build them. They've got to hang them. That takes time. It hasn't happened yet. But all of the rest of the wall is up. Sanballat is really upset about this. And everything that he's tried to do to discourage these guys hasn't worked. So now all that is left is for him to take out the leader. So he sends a letter to Nehemiah. And the letter says, I'll paraphrase, leave what you're doing and come on over here, let's chat. You know when words are sticky sweet, but they are bitter underneath? Nehemiah knows that these words are intended to draw him away, and they are going to hurt him. They might kill him. They're sending a message. And Sanballat says something. This is his response. And this is another one. Tear another chunk off and write this down. Stick it in your other pocket. He says something, but I realized they were plotting to harm me. So I replied by sending this message to them. Oh, put these words in your soul and use these. I am engaged in a great work, so I can't come. Why should I stop working and come to meet with you? I can't come. I can't come. I'm doing something great. I'm on mission. What you're asking me to do pulls me off mission. I can't come. Why would I come? What you're asking me to do is not on mission. What is your mission? What mission have you asked God? What would he have you do? When you find that out, you need to lock in on that. You may need to change your method 100 times, but never the mission. And there will be things all over the place that try to draw your attention away. There will be really good things that try to draw your attention away. There will be opportunities that try to draw your attention away. There will be things like sleep that you need that will draw you away from the mission. This is what you say when that happens. I am working. I am doing a great work. I cannot come. Why should I come? I am doing a great mission. Those words have rung in my ears ever since I've started working on this. I need to tell you, it was Saturday, not this Saturday, it was last Saturday. My wife was teaching at a retreat somewhere. It was a Saturday where I had my kids, and there was nothing that took our time. We were able to be together. And there's a project that I'm working on. I've been working on it for a long time, and I was very excited about spending a whole day working on this project. My project is in the garage, and so I walked into the garage, and I was standing at the table. And the project was set out on the table, and I was just about to start working on it. But remember, I'm ADD, so I'm thinking about 5 or 6 different things. And one of the things that I'm thinking of is this sermon. And I'm thinking about my mission is to pastor a church. I'm on mission. I'm working on the sermon. I'm on mission. I'm crafting this. I'm praying about this. And this gentle voice came to me by way of a memory. I thought of the Truxell family. They're here somewhere. The Truxell family have children who are the next stage up in age. They're getting their license. They're in high school. They're doing those sort of things. And I looked out the window at my kids who were playing on the deck, and I realized I almost never get the opportunity to have a whole day with just my kids. My mission is to love my family and be a pastor, and I was not on mission. My mission had become finish my project and be a pastor. Play with cars and be a pastor. What is your mission? These are good things. This working in the garage is not a bad thing, and I want opportunities to do that. But on that day, there was an opportunity afforded to me that I just don't get, and I was about to blow it on something that was not my mission. It took me more energy than I want to admit to you to put down the tool and walk out of the garage and go engage with my kids, and what a wonderful day we had. We just played. We just did the things that happen when Dad's there and engaged. We went out and we made a full day out of it. We did special things. I hope someday they'll talk about it, but if they don't, I will. I loved that day. All it cost me was the thing that wasn't my mission. Listen to God. Let God. And the third point is stay on mission.